And before we really get started, because I don't want to forget, this, what we're doing on Wednesday mornings, we normally do on a Friday night and Saturday, you know, as a combined thing. So it's kind of like a fire hose thing, because you see how we do the teaching, and then you have time to process and talk in groups. But normally, because we've never done this before, normally we just do a Friday night and Saturday. So we are doing our next one on July 19th and 20th. So if anybody is interested, anybody that you know that wants to do this, we will be doing this again, and there's 3 different teachers that do that. There's no way I'd be able to do all that, because you'd have to wrap me up in a box and throw me in the sea by the time I was done if I had to do all 8 in a row. So anyway, if you're interested, I've got these cards up here, and this is going to be the next conference that we do in July. Okay, we do it every other month, so in case they can't make that one, we've got another one. So. Okay. Now, last week, we talked about purpose. We talked about what God's purpose for us was. And we kind of figured out, if we just review some of the notes, that we have ideas of what we think it is. But if God's highest glory is His Son, then it's Jesus Christ expressing His life through us that gives God His greatest glory. And God did not create us to use us, but to love and enjoy us, and to give us His very life. And then we started to talk about what hinders His purpose. And we had the 2-sided chart. One was law, which is the achieving system, and we labeled that flesh, and that's what man does. And then the other side was grace, which is the receiving system, and this is what God does. Now this is kind of maybe for a lot of you words, and you're like hearing it, and you're trying to process, but it's not making sense. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit more about what flesh is, and that's why today is fun. Again, there's 2 systems of living, flesh and spirit, and I'm going to give you a little illustration of what it's not, just to sort of give you some peace and rest. But for Healing Grace, what we do is we actually have advanced training. So we take these teachings and we teach it over a 14-month period of time to people that want to learn how to do what we do, to teach, to instruct, to counsel. And so in the midst of all that, we have a conference where we take them on a retreat for 3 days, and at that retreat, we diagram their flesh. So I was given the gift to allow my husband to come and have a break and just kind of have like a little prayer retreat as we're having this conference. And so we would all eat meals together, and then we would go pray, and you're laughing because you know what I'm going to say. So, is it okay if I share this story?
You can.
So anyway, things were going really, really heavy duty at work, and that's why he wanted to get away for the weekend. And so he hadn't looked at his email and hadn't looked at his email, so by Sunday morning he looked at his email, and there was a lot of stuff there that was very weighty and heavy and kind of stressful, and he just was not in a good place on Sunday morning. So he said, I'm not going to go to breakfast this morning, I'm just going to stay here in the room. I'm like, okay. So I go to breakfast and join everybody, and my sister's there, and she says, where's Dave? And I went, oh, he's in the flesh, meaning he's processing. Because I figured she knew what I meant, because that's what we're doing all weekend. She's imagining my husband lay down on the bed in the flesh saying, why is she telling me that? So anyway, we are not talking about the flesh, we're talking about the flesh. And the flesh basically is anything I turn to apart from God to get my needs met. Now we have a traditional view I'm in the flesh. It's not going anywhere. Let me try quick. Ta-da! Thank you. It works. Okay, the flesh defined. Now there are traditional views of what it is. And flesh is evil behavior, and the spirit is good behavior. Anybody ever hear that before? That's what you believe it is, really. That's basically how I always thought it was. The good me versus the bad me, God helps the good me. I was told there was a situation where you have the black dog and the white dog, and whichever one you feed the most, that's the one that gets stronger. So I'm doing all the things I can to feed the white dog, but the black dog keeps rearing its ugly head, and I'm not sure how to manage the black dog. And then you also have those cartoons. How many times have you seen it where you got a little angel on one side, a little devil on the other one, trying to get you to do one thing or the other? Well, that's the traditional view of what we have believed it is. But now we want to see what the biblical view is. It's amazing how we take all these teachings, and they're not from the Bible, but we believe them because we got them in church or something like that, or mom and dad or whatever. Flesh is our living out of our own natural resources. The Bible says in Philippians 3:3-7, "For we are the true circumcision who worship in the Spirit of God and glory in Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh. Although I myself might have confidence even in the flesh, if anyone else has a mind to put confidence in the flesh, I far more. Circumcised the 8th day of the nation of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to the righteousness which is in the law found blameless. For whatever things were gained to me, those things I have counted as loss for the sake of Christ." Now, I don't know about you, but when you read the New Testament, Paul wrote the majority of it. And if anybody had it together, Paul did. And Paul had a pedigree that would outshine most people of his day. And the other thing that's amazing to me is he probably had the entire Old Testament memorized, because that's basically what they did. I mean, up to, I think, 5 years old, they started and they had to memorize, the Torah. And then, depending upon the women, had to memorize Proverbs and Psalms because they led worship in the home. So they had all this stuff done. And I don't know about you, but I feel really good about myself if I memorized the Old Testament. Like I read that a couple weeks ago that Mike Wells had said, if I memorized the entire Bible and someone would quote a verse, and I could tell you the verse before and after, and you would rise up and go, "Oh, is she godly?" But that's not what this is about. It's not about what we accomplish here. And even Paul is saying, don't put confidence in the things that you accomplish in your flesh. 1 Corinthians, "For consider your calling, brethren, that there were not many wise according to the flesh or human standards, not many mighty, not many noble." So we've got the two standards, the two systems, the spirit and the flesh, or the law. Galatians 3:3, "Are you so foolish? Having begun by the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh or human effort?" Somebody gets saved, and we give them a list of things they got to do. That's not what the Bible teaches. So the definition of the flesh, the flesh or self-life is the condition, mindset, attitude, strategy of living where my focus is primarily on myself. Even if it's good-looking self, well-adjusted self, or socially acceptable self. Where I am living out of my own resources, such as heritage, education, IQ, personality, sense of humor, looks, talents, abilities, capabilities, self-discipline, self-strength, etc. in order to cope or deal with life, solve my problems, meet my needs, or become a success. So looking at the yellow, the flesh is the condition where my focus is primarily on myself, where I'm living out of my own resources. In other words, it's me trying to live life independent of Christ. Now, where did this come from? There were two trees in the garden. What were they? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Very good. I thought that was a cool Bible story. They ate from that tree, everything changed, and then I never thought about the tree of good knowledge, knowledge of good and evil again, nor did I think about the tree of life. I just figured, okay, that was good, check, got it. And I moved on. But now it has a heck of a lot more significance for me now, because now I'm understanding the cost to mankind from eating from that tree. Prior to eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, did Adam and Eve know the difference between good and evil? No, they didn't, did they? All they knew was every need they ever had was met. God met them in the garden, and God supplied all their needs, and they just lived and just loved life and worked in the garden, and things were wonderful. Then all of a sudden, They're eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What do? They hide. So God comes looking for them one day and says, where are you? Now, do you think God didn't know where they were? But he was giving them the opportunity to tell him, I'm here, but they hid. And then he said, well, why are you hiding? He said, because we're naked. And God said, who told you that you were naked? In other words, who told you that I was not enough? Who told you that you had to now meet your own needs because I wasn't enough for you? So now that they've done that, things have changed. And that gift has been passed on to us. Thank you, Adam and Eve. So the flesh, or the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is self-sufficiency. I have to make my walk with God work. I have to make my walk on this earth work. I have to make it all make me happy. Where the tree of life is spirit or Christ sufficiency. The tree of the knowledge is independence. The tree of life is dependence. The tree of the knowledge is bondage. The tree of life is freedom. The tree of life of good and evil is law. The tree of life is grace. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is death. And the tree of life is life. So to get a better understanding of flesh, we're going to talk about the varieties of flesh. First we have well-adjusted flesh. USDA, grade A, all together, looks good, but relies on itself flesh. Then we have religious flesh. This is where I rely on religion to give me life. I know Bible verses, but unfortunately I become very judgmental and prideful because look at all I know. It's interesting, when we first moved here 17 years ago, we were trying to find a church. It took us only 3 weeks to find 12 Stone, which is kind of cool. But one of those weeks we went to a rather large church, and the first week we thought, well, we're not going to get a good idea of what this church is all about just by going to church, so we decided to go to Sunday school. And as we're sitting in Sunday school, this man gets up and he starts talking about this Gwinnett Fair, and that they had some table or booth at this Gwinnett Fairgrounds, and that he talked about all the people he witnessed to, and he had this huge number. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm listening to him talk about how I wouldn't let them leave until they accepted Christ. And I'm thinking, how many of these people that he was hitting across the head with the Bible just said yes to get away from the Bible hitting, you know? That would be considered religious flesh. Look what all I'm doing for God. Then you have self-deprecating flesh. Always putting yourself down. Who wants to talk to me? I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. Passive flesh. Well, that's okay. It's all right. Don't worry about me. You choose where we go to dinner. I don't have an opinion. You choose the movie we go to. I don't care where we go on vacation, wherever you choose. This is my grandmother. This was years ago. She and my grandfather always got up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and have devotions together and then have breakfast together. They did this as long as I can remember. So there was a Christmas when they had come to stay at my mom's house. They lived at the Jersey Shore and she lived outside of Philadelphia. And they came to stay with her, but my grandfather was sick. So they put him in the hospital. And the very next morning, while he's in the hospital, my grandmother doesn't come downstairs at 6 o'clock in the morning. And she doesn't come down at 7. She doesn't come down at 8. And around 9 o'clock, she sort of slowly walks downstairs. And we're all thinking she had a heart attack or something. And we said, Grandma, you okay? She says, oh, no, dear. She said, I'm not a morning person. But for the past 60 years, I've been getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning because your grandfather wanted me to. She goes, I get to sleep in now. That's what you call passive flesh. And you have self-centered flesh, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's all about me. Other-centered flesh, which is all about other people. It's always focused on them, and that's codependency. That's what falls into that one. I heard a great definition of codependency. It was when the other person's problem is more important to you than it is to them. Really cool. Then we have hostile flesh. Again, that's a critical spirit or attitude, judgmental, self-righteous, angry, controlling. People-pleasing flesh. Whatever you say. And then withdrawn flesh. And that's very self-protective. So again, we listed a whole bunch of different kinds of flesh. And the thing is, we think all flesh is ugly. But there's good-looking flesh. It's well-adjusted, it's passive, it's sweet, and it's religious. And then we have yucky flesh. And it's poorly adjusted, dominant, mean, and irreligious. So what are the most common characteristics of the flesh? Flesh is a controller. And that is the number one characteristic of the flesh. So how does that manifest or control? How does controlling the flesh, or how's flesh controlling, how does that manifest itself? Well, with a critical attitude. And you have body language. This is my favorite, silent treatment. Honey, can I tell this story too?
Which one?
It doesn't matter, Dave. Hang down will do.
When we were been married about 15 or so years, my husband worked with the Arthritis Foundation, and what they did was they flew all their staff to Texas. And we stayed at this beautiful country club. So we had this gorgeous room, you know, and all the people would meet in some place. But what we did, we decided to make it a longer trip. So we spent 2 or 3 days at the country club. But because my mom was volunteering and helping my husband administratively, they let her come as well and bring my stepdad. So they had a nice room as well. And then once we left the country club, we were going to spend like 3 or 4 days driving down to San Antonio and stuff like that to visit. But to save money, we would share a hotel room. But we still had 3 days, you know, to be together. So my husband, if you do not know him, has no strangers in his life, just friends he hasn't met yet. So the first night, we had this kind of a reception, and you walk into this massive room with hundreds of people. And remember, I'm an introvert. Hundreds of people, and all these hors d'oeuvres are laid up on tables, and my husband's eyes have this beautiful glint, and he says, "Wow, look at all the people I haven't met yet," and he disappeared. The next 3 days, I was employing the silent treatment. When I finally got through the silent treatment, which was very controlling and very effective, then we were sharing a room with my parents. So much for our nice week down in Texas. So it's interesting because he learned his lesson well. I made sure, because the next time we went on one of these trips, he stayed by my side like a little kid. "Are you okay? Can I do anything? Are you okay? Anything else I need to say?" "Okay, you're all right. I'm okay. I'm comfortable. I'm with people." I've come a long way, baby. Please say yes.
Yeah, we do. For 15 years, I would keep you by my side now. Yes.
You would? Okay. Another one's hostile behavior. Seductive behavior. I used to work with somebody who kind of had that. Whenever she had an argument with her husband, she would turn on the charm and all that stuff and the clothes that she wore. And I would watch men come into the office and just fall over themselves to talk to her. And I'd be like, "I guess that's not my problem." But it was like, wow, unbelievable. Play politics. Blackmail, intimidation. Passivity. Manipulation, that's a nice one. Religion. Guilt and shame, another powerful one. Overprotection. You know, it's interesting, when we use overprotection as a control method on our spouse or on our children, they get the message that they're not capable of making any decisions on their own. And then when they get off on their own, they jump off the deep end because they have no idea. They make all these bad decisions because they've never had to make them, because we're so controlling and so protective. And then playing favorites. Now, what is the purpose of control? To keep God or others from getting too close to us. To keep us from getting overwhelmed by circumstances. To protect ourselves from others. And to keep our emotions suppressed. You know, flesh, we get what we want. And flesh is self-protective.